He was a man of faith, or so they thought. But beneath the pastor's holy facade lay secrets darker than anyone could imagine. In a quiet town, nestled between rolling hills and endless fields, a small church sat at its center, a place as familiar to its people as their own family. It was here that community members sought comfort, a sanctuary where voices lifted in harmony on Sunday mornings, filling the air with words of hope. This was a place of refuge, a place where the walls held their secrets and their sorrows, and above all, it was a place bound together by unwavering trust in one man, the pastor. The pastor, a figure who had been part of this town's fabric for years, commanded a rare kind of respect. His words seemed to echo the deepest truths of faith and resolve, bringing peace to those who struggled and direction to those who were lost. Congregants spoke of his kindness and empathy, his willingness to visit the sick, and his strength in times of loss. He was the kind of man whose presence felt reassuring, like a shelter during life's hardest storms. For the church community, his sermons were more than words. They were a guide, a moral compass they followed without question. Families trusted him with their most private worries, knowing he would listen, offering guidance without judgment. They turned to him in moments of joy and despair alike, sharing births, weddings, and even the deepest heartbreaks. His influence was not just within the walls of the church, but also throughout the town, where people found comfort in his presence, believing he was a beacon of integrity, faith, and understanding. One of the congregants, a young woman and daughter of one of his most dedicated followers, became particularly drawn to his words. She was a gentle soul, well-liked and full of promise, yet uncertain about her path. Like many, she found a sense of peace in the pastor's teachings, clinging to the hope that he could provide the guidance she so desperately sought. She saw him as someone who could help her find clarity, a mentor who could offer the kind of wisdom that only experience and faith could bring. At first, her interactions with him were innocent, mere conversations after service that grew into private sessions under the guise of mentorship. She shared her hopes, her dreams, and her fears, feeling a connection that seemed almost spiritual. And while the town watched, they saw nothing out of the ordinary, a young woman finding solace in her faith, a pastor guiding one of his flock. But some who knew her best noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. Friends remarked on her newfound restlessness, her eagerness to seek his counsel at every opportunity, her constant presence at the church, even when no service was being held. What began as simple admiration slowly transformed, moving into a hidden world they thought no one could see. There were whispered words, glances that lingered a little too long, and a growing intensity that only the two of them could fully understand. But in the shadows of their stolen moments, the pastor's influence became something much more dangerous, a power over her that crept into every part of her life, leaving her isolated and uncertain of her own thoughts. The town remained unaware, their trust blinding them to the shifts that others might have seen. A community built on faith and tradition, they could not imagine that beneath his righteous image lay a man capable of such betrayal. And as their meetings continued, a darkness began to settle, the boundaries blurred beyond recognition, and the pastor's intentions took a turn that even he had not foreseen. For those who worshipped under his guidance, a painful truth was on the horizon. This small town, bound by faith and tradition, was about to be shaken to its core, left questioning everything they believed to be true. In the quiet of their community, as dawn broke each day and the bells of the church echoed in the stillness, a storm was brewing, unseen yet inevitable, a fracture that would leave nothing untouched. Under the familiar roof of the church, a series of hidden encounters began to unfold, encounters that looked innocent on the surface, yet hinted at something far deeper and more troubling. The pastor, a man once known for his sense of duty and strict adherence to values, had started meeting the young woman regularly under the pretext of offering her spiritual counsel. To those around them, this arrangement was nothing out of the ordinary. After all, he had been known to counsel numerous congregants through times of doubt. But with this particular young woman, the nature of his guidance began to change in ways only the two of them understood. For her, these sessions brought a sense of closeness she hadn't experienced before, a chance to unburden herself to someone who seemed to genuinely care, someone whose words offered a strange comfort. With time, the lines blurred. Private conversations stretched longer, touching not just on spiritual matters, but on topics that felt far more personal. What started as casual guidance developed into a connection veiled in secrecy, each interaction building on the last until these encounters became essential to both of them. Meanwhile, members of the congregation began to notice subtle changes in the pastor's demeanor. His once open, welcoming nature seemed guarded. He no longer lingered after services to chat or offer words of encouragement as he had done for years. Those closest to him could sense the tension in his movements, the way he avoided eye contact, and how he grew quiet when certain subjects arose. He had started glancing over his shoulder, his once confident presence now shaded with anxiety, as if each moment spent in the company of his flock could reveal the truth he held within. Among the churchgoers, quiet murmurs began to spread. People spoke in hushed voices about strange sightings and the pastor's growing distance. Some had seen him meeting the young woman at odd hours, their conversations strained, her face downcast. A few of the elders even expressed concern, sensing an unsettling shift that they couldn't quite place. But trust, so deeply embedded in this community, kept them from acting on these doubts, held in check by the respect they had for his position. In the young woman's family, however, the worries began to deepen. They noticed her absence from family gatherings, her sudden silence when certain topics came up, and the vacant look in her eyes as if she carried a secret too heavy to reveal. She had always been open and warm, close to her parents and eager to share her life's details. But now a strange distance settled between them, a silence that wasn't there before, like something unseen had come between her and the family she once leaned on. They began to question her, their concerns edging closer to accusations. Why did she spend so much time at the church? Why did she seem to linger there long after others had left? Her answers, evasive and vague, only deepened their worry, and with each passing day, their suspicions grew sharper. When they confronted the pastor directly, seeking clarity, he remained calm, assuring them that his intentions were pure, that he was merely offering guidance during a difficult period. Yet his words rang hollow, a practiced response that felt rehearsed, as if he had anticipated the questions long before they were ever asked. As the family pushed further, the pastor's anxiety grew, manifesting in strange behaviors that few could ignore. His presence at the pulpit, once so commanding, began to falter. Small slips in his sermons, moments where his words trailed off or his focus seemed elsewhere, caught the attention of even the least suspicious congregants. And when others began noticing his habit of looking over his shoulder, of casting nervous glances toward the back of the room, they started to wonder if there was more to the story than met the eye. The young woman herself became a figure of increasing isolation, drifting further from her friends and family. She seemed lost, her demeanor shifting from hopeful to hesitant, as if she, too, felt the weight of what lay hidden. In the private hours of the church, the pastor's hold over her grew stronger, his influence shaping her thoughts, her beliefs, until she could scarcely recognize her own voice. Her trust in him, once based on respect and admiration, had evolved into something that bound her, each visit to the church drawing her deeper into the web they shared. The townsfolk, sensing something amiss, began to watch more closely. Conversations grew tense, people casting suspicious glances, wondering if they had missed something, if they had allowed themselves to be blinded by the faith they held so dearly. The community's foundation began to shift, built as it was on faith and trust in a man whose very presence was now under question. Even those who had known him for years, who had defended his name without hesitation, found themselves unable to ignore the changes they saw, changes that whispered of secrets no one dared to confront. What would you do if you were in their place? Could you set aside years of trust in a man you once revered? Would you protect your family, or would you remain bound by the loyalty you felt, clinging to the hope that he was still the man he once claimed to be? In that church, in that town, each member of the congregation would soon face a choice that would reveal the depths of their beliefs and their fears, a test that would challenge everything they had ever trusted. The family's resolve had reached a breaking point. After weeks of strange silences and lingering doubts, the tension could no longer be ignored. The young woman's parents, whose attempts to connect with their daughter had grown increasingly strained, decided that there could be no more waiting, no more patience. They made their way to the church, their footsteps heavy with determination and fear. They wanted answers, and this time they were unwilling to accept anything less than the truth. When they reached his office, the pastor greeted them with a strained smile. He seemed to sense the gravity of their visit, his calm demeanor masking an unease he couldn't quite hide. As they settled in, the questions began, each one a challenge to the narrative he had carefully crafted. His answers came slowly, cautiously, each word calculated to maintain the image he had worked so hard to build. But as their questions grew more direct, his control began to slip. The family pressed him on details that didn't add up, moments that didn't make sense, and each time he deflected, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying something deeper. As the confrontation escalated, a tension filled the room, thick and inescapable. The pastor's facade cracked, and a flash of anger appeared in his eyes, a brief, unguarded moment that left the family frozen. He quickly composed himself, but the damage was done. They had seen a side of him that he could no longer hide, a glimpse of a person they never imagined existed behind the gentle smile they had once trusted so deeply. The meeting ended abruptly, the family leaving with more questions than answers, haunted by the look in his eyes and the feeling that something dark lay just beneath the surface. That night, a decision was made. The family would talk with their daughter directly, in a way they hadn't before, hoping to reach her before things went further. But as the evening descended, bringing with it an unnerving quiet, an event unfolded that none could have foreseen. In the early hours, a terrible sound broke the stillness, a single scream, brief and harrowing, followed by silence. Neighbors, roused from their sleep, ventured out, their curiosity laced with fear. As they gathered, word spread quickly. Something had happened at the church. By the time they arrived, the sight before them left them in shock. There, in the place they had once held sacred, lay the evidence of betrayal and violence, a scene that marked the end of innocence for their town. The news swept through the community like wildfire, leaving an atmosphere thick with disbelief. This pastor, the man they had trusted, the man who had been at the center of their lives, was now at the center of a tragedy. People gathered outside the church, their faces a mixture of shock, grief, and incomprehension. For years they had looked to him as a guide, a figure of unwavering integrity. Now they were left questioning everything, their faith shaken by the realization that he had been hiding a darkness no one had suspected. The days that followed were filled with grief, confusion, and a profound sense of betrayal. The congregation, once a united front, was now fractured, each member left to grapple with the knowledge that they had trusted a man capable of such acts. They questioned themselves, each other, and the faith that had once bound them together. Families gathered in their homes, struggling to make sense of the events. haunted by memories of the pastor's words, his guidance, and the trust they had placed in him so freely. For the young woman's family, the loss was a wound that went far beyond words. Their grief was a silent weight, an ever-present shadow that lingered over every moment, every memory. They had trusted him with their daughter's well-being, and now they were left with nothing but questions that would never be answered. Anger and sorrow mingled, each day bringing fresh reminders of what they had lost, of the life that had been taken from them. The church itself, once a place of sanctuary and peace, now stood silent, its doors closed, its pews empty. No longer did the voices of the congregation echo within its walls. Instead, it became a monument to a betrayal that had shattered the community. Those who had once gathered there now found themselves questioning their beliefs, their loyalty, and the foundations on which they had built their lives. For the first time, they saw the church not as a place of safety, but as a place that had concealed secrets, a place where trust had been given and then broken in the most devastating way. And in that town, among the lingering doubts and unanswered questions, the legacy of that night remained, a reminder that even the places and people we hold most sacred can sometimes hold the deepest, darkest secrets. The pastor, once a figure of respect, had left a mark on their lives, a mark that would remain for years, etched into the memories of a community left to piece together the remnants of their faith, one shattered fragment at a time. Investigators faced a grim task as they began to piece together the final events that had shattered the community's trust. The evidence left at the scene, while minimal, hinted at a story darker than anything the town had imagined. Police scoured through messages, handwritten notes, and receipts that documented an affair hidden under layers of secrecy. The young woman's family was questioned repeatedly, their voices heavy with the knowledge that the man they had trusted with their daughter's well-being had instead pulled her into his control. Each new detail painted a more disturbing picture of the pastor's life, one far removed from the image he had cultivated in the eyes of his congregation. As the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered a pattern of manipulation that stretched beyond a simple affair. They found evidence that the pastor had used his position to keep people close to him, exploiting their trust to suit his own needs. Conversations and encounters came to light, each one revealing another facet of his personality, one that was far more calculating, far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. His influence extended far, creating a system where those around him felt unable to question his motives, bound by the faith they had placed in him. It was this very faith that had allowed him to carry on, unchallenged, until tragedy struck. The trial that followed was tense, filled with moments that left the courtroom silent in disbelief. Former congregants, friends, and even the young woman's family were called upon to testify, recounting their interactions with a man they had once trusted beyond doubt. Each witness brought a new layer of complexity, painting a picture that was at once familiar and foreign. The evidence against him grew, with messages that detailed his intimate relationship with the young woman, financial records showing unusual spending, and testimonies from those who had noticed his increasingly erratic behavior. He sat in the courtroom, listening as each witness recounted their story, his expression unreadable as the weight of his deception was laid bare. The pastor's defense attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that he was a flawed man, but not the monster the prosecution portrayed. They pointed to his years of service, the countless lives he had guided, and the charity work he had organized. But these claims rang hollow in the face of the overwhelming evidence. The community, once unified in their support, was now divided, some clinging to the belief that he had been misunderstood, while others struggled to reconcile the man they had known with the actions he had taken. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom fell silent. The pastor was found guilty, his sentence a reflection of the betrayal and harm he had inflicted on a community that had once revered him. He left the courtroom in handcuffs, his eyes fixed on the ground, the weight of his actions a burden he could no longer escape. His sentence marked the end of one chapter, but for those left behind, the questions lingered. The church, now without its leader, became a place of quiet reflection, its doors open but its pews often empty. Some congregants could not bring themselves to return, the memories too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Others continued to gather, hoping to reclaim a sense of peace in a place that had once brought them comfort. But every sermon, every prayer was tinged with the memory of the man they had trusted, a reminder that faith, once broken, is not easily restored. Yet even as the trial ended, doubts persisted. Some in the community clung to the idea that there was more to the story than what the evidence suggested, that perhaps they had misunderstood or been too quick to judge. Rumors circulated about motives, about what had truly led him down such a dark path. Friends who had known him for years questioned how they could have missed the signs, wondering if they had been too blinded by their faith to see the truth. For some, the question of his true character remained unanswered, a lingering mystery that would haunt them long after the case was closed. As time passed, the town slowly began to heal, though the scars left by the pastor's actions ran deep. Families who had once been united in faith found themselves divided, each member struggling to reconcile the man they had known with the man they had seen in court. Some left the church altogether, unable to bear the weight of the memories it held. Others stayed, determined to rebuild, to find strength in the faith that had once bound them together. And though the pastor's presence was gone, his memory remained, a shadow over a town that had once placed its trust in a man they thought they knew.